Hello Guardians, ISO here. A few months ago during the launch of Beyond Light, Titan, Io, Mars, and Mercury were swallowed by the darkness and disappeared. Before this happened, Commander Zavala issued orders to return to the last city for safety, and most of those stationed on the planets declined this order, choosing instead to stay. Each of them have their own reasons for staying, and each of them have their own story. These stories are explored in the lore book Duress and Egress. And during this part, we'll look into the story of Asher Mir, the Gensym Scribe. This grumpy warlock is first mentioned in Destiny 1, when Eris Morn describes him as the one to stay by her side when she was recovering after her failure in the Hellmouth on Luna, which was a large machina-forming engine. Inside, Asher did battle with Brachyon, the Genesis Mind, by the shoreline of a radiolarian lake, but during the battle he was blindsided by an attack, feeling a powerful sting in his right arm, and then nothing. He awoke in a medical facility, his right arm having been converted to a Vex arm, and his ghost now having a red eye, like a Vex goblin. It never spoke again. During the events of the Red War and beyond, Asher set up a research station on Io, looking more into the Vex and writing many books about them. His ultimate goal was to find a cure for the Vex affliction, which he noticed was slowly spreading across his body. When he eventually met the protagonist, he used them as a research assistant, sending them into the field to collect data on the Vex and the Taken, which usually involved fighting them. And to his satisfaction, Asher Mir had his revenge when he sent the protagonist into the Pyramidion to destroy the Genesis Mind that took his arm, and his ghost. While inside, the layout looked completely different to the protagonist. Instead of a lake, they found only a huge pit, doing battle with Brachyon at the bottom, and slaying the Genesis Mind. But Asher's condition was worsening. Based on his occasional painful coughing fits, he assumed that his lungs were partially converted already. Ikora tried to give him resources to assist in his research. Cryptarchs, the Hidden, Awoken Techians. She even suggested her old exiled mentor, Osiris. But he relented that no one knew about the illness and that the Vex were the only answer. He believed that all of his endeavors would be fruitless, and wondered if he should even continue trying. Then, the Pyramids of Darkness arrived in the Sol system. The first one was on Io, and this seemed to have actually put some pep back in his step as a new terrifying distraction, seen in the chapter Asher Observation. Man of science though he was, the first thing Asher Mir did was shoot the damned thing. The pyramid hovered inside Io's atmosphere, close enough to be impacted by a projectile flung at sufficient speed. In the time it took Asher to blink twice, he knew the angle of attack and the mass of the projectile. Asher finished building the mounted railgun before his coffee had cooled. He charged the magnetic coils, waited for the wind to die down, and then broadsided the ship. He had expected the projectile to hit a kinetic barrier, or best case scenario, impact the pyramid and cause utterly infinitesimal damage. Instead, at the moment of impact, the projectile stopped existing. Asher's brow furrowed while an irrepressible smile crept over his face. His metal arm clinked and hummed gently of its own accord. This pyramid had the audacity to park in front of his laboratory and pull such a cheap trick? Clearly it had not thought it would meet Asher Mir. He assembled another missile, one with a detachable radiation signature and a radio signal. He fired it at the pyramid. It similarly disappeared on impact, its signals snuffed out, no longer detectable from Io's surface. Another payload followed, this one a miniature relay station. He routed it through his console and fired. At the moment it touched the pyramid, it transmitted a spike of radiation and radio broadcast. Asher smirked. They were still there, held in the field of the pyramid. Visually undetectable, signals squelched, but still physically there. How the pyramid was accomplishing this feat was unimportant at the moment, though his mind flooded with fantasies of zero-point energy. The question that gave him pause was the what. What was the ship doing to the projectiles as they sat suspended in space at the periphery of its loathsome shape? And why? As his research into the pyramids continued, he knew that the darkness would come in full force for Io, for his home, for his Pyramidion. So he made one last visit to the closest thing he had to a friend, Egress. During the pyramid's arrival, she was also stationed on Io to study the tree of silver wings that had sprouted in the cradle. His final words to her are shown in the chapter, Asher, Prediction. Asher Mir cursed his way across Io. As he picked his way across the rocky outcrops, he cursed the loose soil underfoot, cursing his oversized pack, cursing the roving Taken, cursed the kick of the Silicon Neuroma rifle against his shoulder. He looked up at the pyramid funneling its foul energies down into the cradle and sneered. Well read as he was, he didn't have the energy to arrange the required words. It was late during what passed for night on Io, and while Asher was tired, he hiked on diligently. He stopped only once, briefly, to study a snail whose shell was growing tiny clusters of crystalline black obelisks. He crept down through the cavernous spaces beneath the cradle. Unfamiliar roots protruded from the earthen walls. He calmly observed the pattern of a twitching shrieker, and his calculated ricochet sent a band of Taken roaring down the wrong pathway. He passed unmolested. Egress was in her meager camp near the twisted roots of the enormous tree. She knelt near a beam of light coming from far above, which filtered through the pith of the tree to strike an unnatural splash of cambium petals. Asher noticed the smells of sap and burned cooking oil. She said she was pleased to see him, though when she sought to clarify the cadence of his supply drops, he felt she might be put off by the unexpected visit. As he unpacked what he had brought her, she explained the tree, the messages, the whispers, the thrilling struggle to glimpse the face of the unknown, even if that unknown might be trying to kill you. She was smiling as she spoke. Asher understood exactly what she meant. He rested by the fire. Nearby was a small table that held samples of hive chitin, clippings from the tree, ashy soil, and an open notebook that Asher saw was a personal journal, which he quickly flipped shut with distaste. He reached again into his pack. He brought forth a bottle of fine golden spirits, from when some towering ignoramus misunderstood his request for isopropyl alcohol, and placed it on the table. He'd brought 2 clean glasses, nestled ridiculously in the boxy shipping case of a long, graduated cylinder. He removed one and placed it gently next to the bottle. Asher coughed, relaced his boots, then stood and shouldered his pack. "You have things taken care of, yes?" he said to Egress. "Certainly," she said, intent on the beam of swirling light. He shifted and made a little noise in his throat. "I need to know that things will be taken care of," he said clearly. Egress looked over and considered the man standing across from her. "To the best of my ability," she finally said. Asher nodded and began his long walk back. He didn't go to Egress to check up on her. He went to say goodbye. Confident that his final death was approaching and that Egress would take care of things, he began his final mission, as seen in the chapter Asher, Conclusion. As Asher Mir watched his assistant's ship tear into orbit for the last time, it occurred to him that he had not expressed how truly satisfactory he had found some of their work. He briefly entertained the thought of leaving a letter, but there were others more deserving of his thoughts. And if he worked in descending priority, he might never make it to his assistant, which would defeat the purpose of the exercise completely. Instead, he went to the Pyramidion. The Vex are not born, yet not created. Desire to understand this conundrum brought Asher to Io. He reasoned that the pyramid, with its alien resources and unknowable power, had likely come for the same purpose. The dark ship sought to take the secrets of the Vex for itself. But Asher Mir had already staked his claim, and he was prepared to defend it. He soon stood at the gate of the Pyramidion. The Vex security responded as he knew they would, and he was prepared. He piled their broken corpses on the plates and continued inside. He destroyed the first 100 Vex, then the second. A Minotaur roared into being before him, and he crushed its radiolarian core in his metal fist. He climbed forward over their clawing limbs. He slipped into the cooling roux of their dead fluid. Asher swallowed a mouthful of blood and kept moving. He paused by a whirling gate and watched the aperiodic waves, then stepped through at the only possible moment. He walked steadily through laser grids that seemed to bend around him. He hung calmly in a gravitational tourbillon as the ground beneath him flickered and shifted madly. And the Vex began to observe. The corridors of the Pyramidion were lined with glowing red eyes. The metal mannequins stood dumbly, twitching, shuddering as Asher passed. A familiar area unfolded before him. A cubist sinkhole reeking with the flat base stench of slate mud and bleach. He looked where the sky should be, and found another impossible shape. Another fractal contradiction. Far above him, placid in its Penrose vortex, the vast radiolarian lake lapped gently at the metallic shores. The man reached up to the lake with his metal arm. Then he reached with his arm of flesh. He reached with both, and he brought the lake down. This ending to Asher's story is left ambiguous. He loved the Pyramidion, seeing it as his own territory and his to claim. His to destroy. Some believe that Asher destroyed the core of the Pyramidion from the inside out, knowing it would kill him. But he did so that the darkness would not have access to it when they finally fully claimed Io. However, I believe something different. The Pyramidion was not Asher's to destroy, it was his to protect. I believe in the end, he knew that the only way he could be one with the Pyramidion was to bring down the lake upon himself, fully converting himself into part of the Vex. I believe that he exists now as a subroutine in the Vex programming, like any other Vex mind, but one that might retain his humanity. One that might still hate the dark. One that might be able to help us. But of course, this is all speculation. Asher's story is left ambiguous for a reason, and there's no telling what might occur. So, thank you for joining me today. My statistics tell me that about 60% of you watching aren't subscribed yet, so remember to subscribe if you haven't already. The best way to let me know you enjoy my content is to leave a like on the video or a comment down below. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video, when we talk about Deputy Commander Sloan.